The following episode may contain discussions surrounding suicide, mental health disorders, self-harm, and other very real, very triggering topics. If at any point during the episode you or someone you know is in need of support, please don't wait. Call 988 or visit iasp.info to easily access resources or have a one-on-one conversation with a certified mental health expert. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Make Mental podcast. As always, your host, Caleb Munsky here. And today we have a very exciting guest. This is something unusual for us. So make sure you save this episode, go back to it when you need it, because we have on a very, very successful and exciting person, Jeff Knauss. Thank you for joining us, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Caleb.
And for those who don't know, I usually wear some sort of Make Mental gear for the podcast, but because we have a fellow Oswego alum, I had to put on some
right.
Oswego gear.
Oh, nice.
I know, I had to switch it up. Usually
I'm
repping a hat or something, but Oswego, we got to keep it in-house. You have Cuse on, close enough. Born and raised Liverpool for me, so Cuse always has a special place in my heart.
I should do a plug. This is actually from a guy that is, his name's Sully, and his company's called By Sully.
I saw that on Instagram. I need one of those.
Yeah.
It's not even a want. It's a need.
This is so sick, right?
Yeah.
Like the designs are incredible. The guy he's a local guy, does his own stuff, and it's amazing.
It's simple, but it's enough to where you're just like, that has some flair, if you don't want to be flashy, but just rock a little, that's what it looks like to me. So
that's it, man. He crushed it. So yeah, shout out to Sully.
So, and can you find him on Instagram or something?
Yeah, I think it's Bysuli.
Bysuli. Okay.
And after I got to know him, I was like, dude, he's a great guy, very talented, and obviously he has a great eye. So I bought a bunch of stuff from him.
Yeah, at the very least, it's free to follow him, right? Help him promote what he does. That's my motto. If it's free and can benefit someone, I might as well. So, but more on Jeff here. For those who don't know Jeff or haven't heard of Jeff, he is kind of a big deal, and I don't think he'll come out in your face and tell you that, because that's not the type of person he is. But he is a 5-time Inc. 5000 founder. He's been featured in Inc. magazine, Fortune magazine, Adweek, Entrepreneur. I mean, you name it. He's a serial entrepreneur, maybe self-proclaimed, but we'll get into that. I love that term. And he's had successful companies. I think the one we talked about off camera here was HiddenFish. We'll definitely get into that, and Skinny Atlas. But I mean, Profound, a company called Profound, XOTaco. There's so many, right? I can't even. DigitalHyve, I believe, is one of them. So many successful startups or people that Jeff has believed in, that he's helped out. We're just so excited to pick his brain, because with all that in mind, it's not like he never faced any adversity. I mean, every human faces adversity. It's not like he had to never overcome a mental hurdle. And that's kind of what we're here to do today. And I said it's a special episode because it really is. From my knowledge, I don't think you are still an athlete, or maybe in college you were, and I didn't see that. But to my knowledge, athletics was not some place you found yourself. So what we're trying to do with this episode is show that just because he's not in athletics doesn't mean us athlete folk, who are our primary listeners, can't learn something, right? So one last time, thank you, Jeff, for coming on and being willing to share your wisdom.
Thanks for having me.
Go Global is a free-flowing technology company that handcrafts, embellishes, and manufactures garments and accessories. Designed on the principles of people, places, and possibilities, Go Global reimagines fashion and is inspired by you, the people of the world. So, Jeff, I want to start I gave kind of synopsis of what maybe the outside world you appear to us as. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and if our perception of you is accurate?
It is always awkward when I get introduced to anywhere. And to hear all of anyone's accomplishments in one short period of time, it's uncomfortable, but especially for me, because to your point, it is odd. I came from a very low income household. I was adopted when I was 3 months old. And I was adopted by two wonderful parents. Grew up in the Finger Lakes, but I was adopted from a very bad situation in Korea. So I was from like day one, I was very, very fortunate. I think that's kind of like been a guiding light for me in my life, is knowing that like I could have grown up in Korea in this really bad situation, but because I was adopted by these two wonderful people, it changed my life, and I had no decision making power over that. It just kind of happened. And so that's how I got started, and grew up in a small town. Again, very low income. My folks that adopted me had to borrow money to adopt me, and it was hard times, but also like I didn't. I think when you're in a income area and you grew up that way, you don't really know any different. So I didn't feel that way. It felt just like a great place to live, and had friends and all that. Um, Went to Oswego, so big Oswego alum, still on the board of directors there, and love meeting anyone from Oswego. Graduated in '07, started in broadcast television, worked in broadcast TV for about 8 years doing advertising. Uh, Moved out to Syracuse to take a management gig. And, as I was doing TV advertising, I realized that I wanted to get more into the digital space. So I focused, I wanted to do more like social media advertising and digital marketing and website building. But in order to do that in the TV world, I would have had to take a step back in my career. And, I started to look around and think about like, okay, how do I immerse myself? Because I think every form of marketing can work, but all the traditional forms of advertising are probably becoming less effective over time, and digital is becoming more effective over time. So that's really why I wanted to focus in on that. I was fortunate enough to meet this guy named Jake at a Tech Garden event, which is a venue in Syracuse. And when I met him, I just knew that this guy was a brilliant, genius digital marketer. And we went out to lunch every once in a while. We became friends, and for about 3 years, that's all it was. And then one day I was like, man, I wish we had started this business, because he had a little consultancy business where he did websites and stuff. And I was like, I wish we started this business together when we were younger. And he's like, you realize we're still pretty young, right? And I was like, well, you may feel that way. At the time, I was 28, which is young. But I had 2 month old or 3 month old at home at the time, and my wife was staying at home with him. And so I was the only income. So I told him, I'm like, dude, it's nice you feel as young as you do, because which I didn't know. I thought he was older than me because he had a beard. He was a big guy. Turns out he was 22, which was insane. Yeah, he was
Oh,
really young,
wow.
and I had no idea. Also an Oswego alum. And but long story short, I talked to my wife and talked to him a little bit more, and we decided to start a company. We called it DigitalHyve. We bootstrapped, so we didn't raise any outside financing. It was just the two of us, and for the first year, it was what I expected to be. We didn't make any money. It was really hard, working day and night, 90-hour weeks, crazy startup life. So for the first year, it was just the two of us, and we were struggling. I was eating a lot of ramen noodles during that time. And it was very scary because I had a 3 month old at home. So, we literally had no money coming into the house. One thing that I always do recommend to younger people is like save as much as you can, because that's the only way I was actually able to start this business, because I saved a bunch of money. Because I grew up the way I did, I had done fairly well in broadcast TV. So I was able to make some money. I saved all that money. I lived like I was poor still. And that's what afforded me to be able to go off and start this company and not get paid for 12 months. After that, first 12 months, we got a little bit of traction. We hired our first employee, started to grow. And in 7 years, we got to 56 employees. We had $15 million in revenue a year. And we were a pretty large company. At that 7 year mark, we decided that it was time to sell the company. So but we wanted to honor the employees that helped us get there. And so we actually wanted to ESOP, which basically means become an employee-owned company, where all the employees become employee owners, and they don't have to pay anything. They just get the ownership, and we kind of sell the company to this, third party intermediary, and then the ownership goes to the employees. A really awesome program. But instead, what we did was they actually sold it to an agency that was already ESOPed. And so all of our employees became employee owners of DigitalHyve, the company that bought us, Butler Till, and their holding company, the real estate holding company. So our employees, it worked
Oh,
out for
wow.
everyone really well. My business partner Jake and I had a really nice exit, and that's the story of DigitalHyve. After I sold the business, I had already been doing some angel investing, so I was angel investor, just investing in different companies in different spaces that I thought were interesting. And then I started to work with my now business partner, Adam Weitzman, We started a diner together called Clover's. We started a sushi restaurant. I also have another restaurant called XOTaco, you mentioned, in Syracuse. I started a mastermind group called Profound, which is 100 of the best business leaders in throughout upstate New York. We get together and have incredible experiences throughout the year. We do dinner clubs. We flew everybody down to Miami in November. We do all this really, really awesome stuff, bring in these incredible speakers and really build relationships to figure out how to help ourselves, how to help each other, and how to help the region grow. So that's Profound, the mastermind group.
Hmm.
And I also joined the board of directors of a bank. It's called Community Bank, or a publicly listed bank. $15 billion assets under management. We also have financial services business. So One Group Insurance, if you know them, we own One Group. We own a large benefits business and like wealth advising businesses. So so it's a pretty cool experience to be part of a public board. I've been on, I think, 8 or 9, private, one private board. I was on the board of directors of Burn Dairy for 5 years, awesome local company. And then I've also done a lot of not-for-profit boards, and I'm actually working on my newest business now. So all that to say, to your point around serial entrepreneurism, I think it's a little bit a mix of desire and disease, I would say.
Huh. That's an interesting way to put it. I mean, obviously, I think it's most people's desire, right, when they look at it from the outside. But what I want to get into eventually here is like, grass isn't always greener, Like it could be green for most seasons, but everybody has a winter, whatever that winter looks like. Like Florida's winters are beautiful compared to Central New York, but it's still considered wintertime in Florida. And I think a lot of times that flies under the radar, right? Just because you are outwardly super successful, I will say, and I choose my words carefully because I do not want to pick the wrong ones. But if you are to the public eye successful, it doesn't come without sacrifice, without struggle, without give and take in relationships. I'm finding that's a massive one in my personal life. 50-50 is a fantasy in any relationship, whether it's your partner, whether it's your child, whether it's your sibling, whatever. 50-50 exists for about 20 seconds during the entire day, and it's when you wake up in the morning. So, but again, you are incredibly successful, and you are still going to be. So we're glad you came on. I kind of want to go back to kind of the beginning. You've been adopted. You've come over from Korea. You've been blessed with this opportunity, and I think from an early age, it seems like you've understood grace and just practicing grace, really the concept of grace, like being thankful for what you were given, not wanting to waste it. And I think a lot of times that is a hard concept to grasp. So I want to point out that you have that.
Thank you.
But that aside, when you had a child, something I don't understand, so I will ask questions here. That has to be a lot of responsibility. I mean, my girlfriend has a dog, and I feel a tremendous amount of responsibility in the week she gives me to watch her, and I get 100 texts. But your own child, there's no comparison from what I've been told. What was it like for you knowing that there might be a chance that this endeavor might not succeed, but I won't say it's a small sliver because I don't know how much of you believe that would succeed. Probably most of you, and that's why it did. But that uncertainty surrounding, okay, I could be spending a lot of my savings on this with a kid and it might not work. What is that feeling like?
It's a good question. So my philosophy around this is that most people govern their lives around the risk of failure. And so what that means is that most people look at it and they kind of, we all have a rubric in the way we make decisions. So every day we're just choosing how we spend our time. And that's really what those small decisions make up a life, right? Like how you choose your time is what your life will look like. And so everything is a choice. And I think that most people tend to govern their decisions around, well, what if this fails? And this risk of like, what if I look like a failure? What if I am a failure? Whatever that means to people, right? A lot of times it's perception based. I don't want people to see me fail. I want people to see me in my best light. But I don't know what it is, but I'm much more governed around the risk of regret than I am of failure. And so I realized that at a pretty young age, where my rubric around decision making is much more focused around like, less about like, what if I do this and I fail, and much more, what if I don't do this and I regret it. And so to me,
Hmm.
that's the easiest way I can make decisions that are what others might deem risky. Is that I think it's a bigger risk to not go off and do something and try something. If you think that you one day, you're 80 years old and you're like, well, what if I started that digital marketing agency? How much would my life have ended up differently? So I think that's much more
Yeah.
how I think about how I approach it.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I won't say, I mean, it's a unique. It's pretty unique. I feel like more people govern their decision making around the first notion that you brought up of perception and not wanting to appear as a failure or not actually failing. Right? Appearance is a lot of our decision making, but at the same time, you have to deal with you at the end of the day. You don't want to look at yourself
Right.
as a failure. Was there a project that you failed on? I mean, you have so many successful projects. Was there one that you failed on and you were like, I'm still glad I did it anyway?
So like I think that there's actually very few times in your life.
Well, I guess
Yeah, yeah,
can
sure.
I rephrase that? Because failure, I think, is
Yeah,
subjective, right? Like failure to me could be, oh my goodness, make mental only lasted a year, but to others that could be the biggest success in
correct.
the world. Like failure to me could be I got a 65 on a test. To others, they could have studied their ass off for that. So whatever you define success as, was there a time you came up short and didn't regret that decision? I think that's a better way to
Yeah,
word that
yeah. I
question.
I, I don't know. I At least when people ask this question, I don't. I can never come up with me remembering a time that I've regretted anything. Like, what's your biggest regret? I don't really regret, and for exactly the reason you said, because the reality is, I think there's very few times in life where there's an objective macro success or failure. Like, it's very, very rare, you know, um, because most of those macro things, like I sold the business and it was successful and I made a bunch of money, like that might be a micro that's kind of objective, like that was a success, right? That was filled with a million failures and wins, right? Like in between the time of me starting and me selling the company, it was all wins, failures. It was daily, right? Like it's just, I failed to communicate to an employee the right way. I failed to talk to a client and we lost that client. I failed to see the future and know that COVID was happening and, and not get, like not have the business prepared for, there's a million failures. And so I like that's why it's always so challenging, this question, because like every day I'm fucking up something. I'm sorry, I don't know if I can swear on this podcast. I didn't
Yeah.
ask you that beforehand, but I do tend to
No,
swear.
you're fine. This is raw and
Yeah, yeah.
authentic. You're
So
okay.
so I am very much I'm very much cognizant that like I think that's why when going back to the last question, that's why I'm not so governed by the idea of failure, because you're gonna fail either way, like, and that's good.
You just fell
Yeah,
forward.
well, and yes, and like for me, that's just how you learn, right? Like when you're a baby, you don't get up and start walking
Hmm.
immediately. You fail a million times before you start walking. You don't learn anything worthwhile learning without failing to do it a bunch of times before you learn the thing you do. So I think that this idea of failure is kind of silly that a lot of us have in our mind, because um, I see failure as trying, and I think that trying is the most important thing we can all do. It's just like just do it. That's what stops so many people from anything. Is like, I'm too scared to even try. That's crazy to me. If you want to do it, if it's going to bring you fulfillment or bring you
Hmm.
happiness, then it's worth the try. Like, and then who cares what happens afterwards? Like, to your point around the Make Mental podcast, if it lasts a year, like you actually made a podcast. I've never done a podcast. So many people have told me like, oh, you should do a podcast. And it's just there's like, I'm just not willing to spend the time there. Again, going back to choices, but like you did it. So many people talk about it. You're doing it. You have guests. You made a podcast. That's the macro objective success, right? And there's going to be times where your headphones don't
Hmm.
work, and there's going to be times that the Zoom breaks down, but
Yeah.
that's micro failures that got you to the macro success of you have a podcast. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Empire Specialty Printing is a family owned and operated screen printing and promotional products company. ESP has been in business for over a decade by providing consistent and high quality service. Products include custom hoodies, shirts, hats, business supplies, and much, much more. Whether it's for a family party, school team, group, or corporate apparel, Empire Specialty Printing has what you need to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think that's a fair standpoint. I want to ask you though, to get to where you're saying like, in order to walk, you have to fall down. You're not born and just start running. And if you are, you might as well go to the Olympics, and congratulations to whatever country you are, because you're going to win. But you stand up and you crawl, you boot scooch, I don't know, whatever babies do until you can walk. And then you start running, and then you can start playing sports. Like for our athletes, like, do you think that this mindset of try, possibly fail, try, possibly succeed, do you think it's something that we can be taught, or do you think it's something that we can only learn and truly understand by, like you said, just trying?
No, I mean, I guess you could be taught it by someone telling you, like, this is the way. Like, I think about my kids and I try to instill a lot of the values that I have, and this is certainly one of them where I want them to, like, I won't ever get down on my kids because, like, let's use sports since this is a sports podcast. Like, my kid is super into soccer right now. Super into soccer. It's all he thinks about. He wakes up every day, just constantly. That's all he does. You're the women's coach at Oswego, right?
The assistant coach, yeah, but played soccer since I learned how to walk, and recently retired to a
I
Sunday
love it.
league.
That's great,
So
man. So I played a little soccer in high school too. So it's very awesome to watch him develop this skill. Not even the skill, the passion for it. He knows everything about FIFA and Europe and all the clubs and the nations and all this stuff. Like, he's a genius when it comes to this stuff, and I love seeing that. But point of that is, like, I'll never get down on him if he is working hard. He's out in the field. He makes a bunch of mistakes. He's 9 years old, right? Like, that's the point. Like, he's supposed to do all of that as much as possible, because the more you do that, the more you'll adjust and learn, and your body will understand, like, oh, I tried to go this way and I tried to do this move, but this move didn't work around this defender. So now next time I got to do that. It's just all optimization, right? So but what I will get upset about is if he doesn't try, right? Like, if you're not out there working, then that's a choice. That's just you saying, I'm not willing to put the effort in to do my best, and that is not acceptable, right? So that's more how I see it.
yeah, and I think that's fair. Why would you don't really have ground to stand on if you're not out there trying, right? In this instance, obviously there are other instances, but in this instance, at a very elementary level, a kid comes home and they're like, I did poorly on a test. Well, did you study? If the answer is no, you can't complain that you did poorly. That's kind of what you're saying here. If you start something and it fails, okay, try again. You did it once, okay? If you succeeded once, then cool, you did something right, remember it, try and emulate it again, but it might fail in a different aspect of business or of life or in sports. Like, a hockey player learns how to skate, cool, they're athletic, they're fit, they're in shape. Then you take off the skates and put them on the soccer field. Well, they have the stamina down, don't forget that. They have maybe situational awareness down, don't forget that. But you're no longer skating. You have to teach your body how to run, and vice versa. I think that's an important thing that sports provides us with, but that we can also see now outside. Like, it's not exclusive. Like, these concepts and these mental battles that sports have taught me specifically, I'm starting to figure out now that sports are gone in my life, because I suffered from athletic identity for quite some time. I suffered with athletic identity before I was no longer an athlete. The weirdest concept I've ever had in my entire life, but I talk about that on other episodes. If we can understand that the intangibles and the soft skills we learn in certain areas of our life, such as trying in this case, can be applied to when we lose or we stop or we are forced out of a different part of our life, I think that is so powerful. And I think that's what you provided us with there. And two quick points here. One, I wanted to say, I read on one of your bios, I think it was on Linktree or Instagram, I don't know, you're a pragmatic optimist. That was a fantastic term to me. I had to relook up the word pragmatic, so I'll let you do the defining. Before we go any more forward, can you just define that? And I think from what I read, this has to do a lot of the mindset you're presenting us. So I want to give people that definition of pragmatic
Well,
optimist.
it's something that I thought of one day. So I don't know if it's exactly how maybe the definition would come out if you Google it, but the reason that I kind of define myself as a pragmatic optimist is because I look at, first of all, I think there's only two ways, like, you know, the things that happen to you, you can look at everything. It doesn't matter what, like literally, it doesn't matter what you, like, I'll give you the worst, most morbid example. Both my parents passed 2 years ago, and and that can be crippling to people, right? It was very hard on me to lose my folks, and um, the way that I process the world in general is very optimistic. And what I mean by that is you can look at things one of two ways. You look at it like, oh gosh, like this is terrible, and which it was, right? But then, and then you go down a very negative side of that, or you could look at that and be like, gosh, like this is such a good reminder, to always be present with my own children, because you never know when you'll be gone. It reminded me of how wonderful parents I have, how lucky I am to be in this world because of all the things they've done for me and taught me. Like, so what I mean by pragmatic optimism is not to look at the world in a way of like everything is rainbows and sunshines, because it's not. It's there are bad things that happen. But the reality is, when those things happen, you can take them and you could dwell in the sadness and get all down about it and just focus on the negative piece of it. Or you can look at it and say, all right, well, what lessons can I learn? What reminders can I have? How can I take this thing pragmatically and turn it into good, right? And so I truly believe that no matter what happens to you, the only way that, the way that I function is that I take it for face value. I say, this isn't the greatest thing. And how can I learn from it? How can I grow from it? How can I get better about it? How can I teach others to be better about it? So that's what I believe is pragmatic optimism, is being pragmatic about the way that I think about the world.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, and thank you for sharing. We apologize for your loss. I mean, time is the ultimate healer, but I can't imagine. So thank you for being open and sharing that. And if any of our listeners at this point may be upset about something that happened in their life, I just want to direct you back to the beginning of the podcast. 988 is the help number to talk to a professional. And then iasp.org is also a website you can visit if you don't have a calling feature. So please take care of yourself. So that way, maybe you can look through the world through a pragmatic optimism lens. Because I love that. I might put that in my bio in quotes and then just put your name, like a little you miss 100% of the shots you don't take,
Yeah.
Wayne Gretzky,
Michael Scott,
yeah. Kind of thing. It might be pragmatic optimist, Jeff Caleb, and then that'll be in my bio. But before we move forward, I did have another question I want to get to, but I'm fascinated by this idea because I've been admittedly reading too many self-help books. It's a bad habit. But Jordan Peterson introduced me to the concept of like the world's not out to get you. Like, contrary to popular belief, there are moments where it feels like that, and there are moments where it's okay to feel like that. But when that becomes a habit, that's when what he calls, through his religious lens, the devil in your life, evil, is out to get you. I'm curious as to your thoughts on that, because you can look at it as like the world's out to get me, or I am what the world makes of me, or I make what the world thinks of me. It's a weird wording that he uses, and I don't know it quote for quote, but basically it's that. It's, I can either let the world dictate how I will go about my day, or I will dictate how the world goes about my day. Does that resonate with you at all?
Truly, realist. The reality is that things are going to happen to you every day, all day long. And the only thing that actually matters when you think about yourself is how you react to them. That's it. Like, no matter what happens to me today, specifically the stuff I can't control, right? Like, I'm going to do everything in my control I'm going to do everything in my power to control as much as I can the things that matter to me, right? Like, I have goals that I set. I want to be a good dad, be a good husband, a good leader, all of those things. So I'm going to do everything that I can to control the controllables. But the uncontrollables, like the stuff that just happens, that is what it is, right? Like it happened to me. Can I control it? No. Then why worry about it, right? So I think I realistically believe that if the only way that I govern my life is I can't control the things that happen to me, just the reactions I have. And it's a very, I don't know if you have you read up on any
Hmm.
Stoicism. You're talking about self-help stuff. Like
Yeah.
I
Yep.
really believe like that a lot of the way I think is it lines up with Stoicism.
Yeah. And oh my goodness, Atomic Habits. They talk about Stoicism a lot in that book. If you had a
Marcus
chance to
Aurelius
read
does a
that,
lot of great.
and
It's yeah, it's a
that
great.
was
It's a great philosophy.
yeah, that was one of the first times I was introduced to that though, and I always saw it as like some ancient voodoo bullshit, to be honest. But the more I read into it, I'm like, wait, it's not a cult. Like, calm down. You're not, you don't like, they're not sucking you in. It's just
It's totally a
it's a
philosophy.
philosophy. And if it
Correct.
resonates with you, fantastic. And I think that's a misconception too. A lot of mental health practices, and I say it almost every episode, are scary because they're seemingly so new. But humans and even animals, like living beings, have been going through problems since before we existed, right? Like, it's not a new concept. Struggles are not a new concept. It's how we have adapted and evolved that has changed the way that the struggles present themselves, for sure. Like, even 40 years ago, like, there was no cyberbullying, or to the extent, like, just different challenges arise, and the way we choose to approach them can change. But fundamentally, if you take care of what you can take care of and try not to worry about what you can't, so hard, way easier said than done, then you will find some
Yeah,
sense of peace and
I think that's
happiness.
right.
And I
And
think that
one of the
is the most
important things you
important
said
part.
is, even with this philosophy, even with the philosophy of like I can't control it, so I just need to understand how I react to it. I'm not saying like of course I still get mad, I still get sick of nothing gets to me, right?
Hmm.
That's not reality. But I think that if your overarching philosophy is I'm only going to control what I can control, I'm only going to react how I want to react to situations, then you're going to be better off than if you don't.
Need a tow? Top Shot Transport is the place to go. From cars to machinery, heavy equipment to general freight, Top Shot Transport will give you the best rate. Top Shot Transport is fully licensed and ready to tow your stuff anywhere. Email topshottransport1@gmail.com for more information.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, in my personal experience, when those things do get to me, or when I do react opposite of how I've been trying to, feelings of selfishness and anger and self-worth all come about. How do you balance those? Because I have ways that I do, and I've shared those, but I'm curious if we share similar ways that we go about combating selfishness when you are such a how do you say that,
Philanthropic.
philanthropic, thank you,
Philanthropic.
person.
Yep.
And then how do you manage maybe the anger when you're like, man, I shouldn't have reacted that way? Or sometimes you let the anger go and you're just like, I have to be angry. Like, how do you get yourself back on track?
Um, Time.
Hmm.
I think that most things, uh, the way that I typically cope with any kind of feeling of uncontrollable emotion is just give it time. So I'll typically like isolate myself for however long. To actually, what works really well is naps.
Hmm.
I am a big proponent of naps, and I think that this culture in general, it's like a funny thing, but like I just find a lot of value in being able to go in a room, close the door, put my alarm on for 20 minutes, pass out. I wake up feeling like a brand new person. Now, I know that's not for everybody. I used to work with somebody that said anytime she took a nap, she threw up afterwards, which was
Oh,
hilarious to
wow.
me. I don't know why she just couldn't take naps.
Huh.
But so I know it's not for everybody. But for me, I think that all of the chemical energy inside of you that's all riled up over whatever the situation is, when you get some distance and time in between that, you could just start to think more rationally and instead of emotionally. And so for me, that's typically how I'll cope with it. Is I'll give myself some space.
Yeah, and to that point, I don't think it makes necessarily the reason that the uncontrollable emotion came up any easier to deal with. It just makes the way that you approach the situation, like you said, more rational, more clear, um, better judgment. I think sometimes when you act based off of initial reaction, there's a lot of regret involved, and that's another emotion for a whole nother podcast episode. I mean, that's such a powerful emotion. But to your point, if you can, I think what you're doing is you're slowing down, right? In a very busy, very fast paced world, even, and it's only getting faster, just to slow down connect with yourself, whether that's take a nap, whether that's do yoga, whether that's journal, whether it's workout, whatever slow down means to you, insert it there before you make what could be an irrational decision. And that's a fantastic point. But I want to circle back. I kind of like to circle back. Maybe that'll be in my bio, professional circle backer. You talk about DigitalHyve and the digital world and marketing and stuff. I'll ask you to define digital marketing for those who might not know what it is. But after that, I have a quote that I want to ask you about that I was actually just listening to Jay Shetty, another one. I draw inspiration from a lot of larger, I guess, philosophical people. But can you define digital marketing for us? And then I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, so digital marketing, unlike, I'll start by saying traditional media or traditional advertising, that's your TV, radio, billboards, physical space type of newspaper ads, type of advertising has been around for a long time. Digital marketing is taking that concept of advertising, telling a brand story, asking for somebody to buy something or, buy into something or learn about something. It's taking that idea and bringing it to the digital world. So that's, social media advertising, search engine marketing, retargeting, which is where if you've been on a site, you've been on Amazon, you look at a pair of shoes, the pair of shoes follows you everywhere you go. That's a form of digital marketing, right? So that's digital marketing, and the benefit to digital marketing is it's very, very targeted because we know who those users are on the other side because it's all digital. Whereas if you're driving on 690 and you see a billboard, I have no idea who's seen it and what they did after they saw it, right? With digital, I know exactly who saw it, what they did, and can I get them back into my ecosystem over and over again. And it's also measurable. So I can say, oh, this person clicked on this ad, they went to this landing page, they went to that landing page, and then they checked out with buying these pairs of shoes or whatever. So that's a little bit about what digital marketing is.
Yeah, I feel like you reached through my screen and were like just kind of crapping on me for shoes there. I've had finally my girlfriend, I say finally in a very joking manner, very appreciative of her, but finally I got a pair of shoes that have been on my Christmas list and in my Dick's Sporting Goods account for 3 years. I just was like, the price goes down and I'm like, no, I don't need these shoes. I need food. So that's going to come first. But
Yeah.
to your point, I find it fascinating in the marketing class that I took. It was social media marketing, actually. And they were talking about search engine optimization. And once you click on the website, everything that goes into that, kind of more nerdy. But there was an algorithm that could tell potential, I guess the people who sell the space, tell potential advertisers where people's cursors sat most time on the page, which is crazy. And at the same time, it's scary, right? If you're like Big Brother government eye person, like that's terrifying. But if you're in the space and a guru like yourself, like that is gold. That is perfect information because you can sell larger spaces here and there. What I want to add,
yeah, that's very common actually. And it's called heat mapping. So you can actually
okay,
follow the cursors to
that
where
makes
people
sense.
go, what people click on. And that's to that point. That's why it's so powerful is because we can watch everything you do. It's all
Yeah,
recorded.
yeah. Which again could evoke crazy emotions for some people, but if you can't control it, there's your point. So
Right.
this is kind of cool. But what I wanted to ask is the Jay Shetty concept of you are who you spend the most, the most, you are most like the 5 people you spend the most time with. Butchered it. Forgive me, Jay Shetty, if you ever listen to this for some reason. But he presented a concept of, okay, cool. There's still human interaction. You can have those 5 people, but now you have to integrate. The most you are most like the 5 people you spend the most time with, plus the most 5 to 10 social media accounts you spend the most time with. I'm curious of your thoughts on that because I've noticed in his episode he talks about how to combat procrastination before it happens. This is where this information comes from, but he talks about following 10 accounts. Like if you want to become a successful influencer, follow the influencer accounts, like and comment. Instagram then knows to show you more pages like that. Do you think that it's safe to say we should start taking that in consideration when we're trying to, let's say, better our mental health? We should, if we want to start getting better mental health, we should follow some accounts.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course. Like, right. Like it's all the social media is consumption, right? It's consumption of media, which has been around, if we were just having this conversation in the 80s, we would talk about what television programs are you watching? What news stations are you watching, right? If we were talking about this in the 50s, you talk about which newspaper are you reading and which articles are you focused on, right? Which magazines are you reading? So really, of course, like the more consumption of information that you take in, that's what you're going to be influenced by, right? Like if you follow certain kinds of people on social media, you're going to be hearing it all of the time, and it's going to influence how your lived experience evolves, and you'll take some of those. Like if you listen to Jay Shetty and he talks about different philosophies of different things, that's stuck in your brain, and then you'll apply that learning when you are on a podcast talking to another person. So the more that you surround and I very much do believe that you are the 5 people you spend the most time with. I think that is very true. I have been very fortunate in my life to be around people that are always optimizing, that are always trying to become better at everything they want to become, that have been successful and want to continue to be successful in all the endeavors in life, right? Because I don't think it's enough, and I think you alluded to this earlier, but I don't think it's enough to be successful in business and be like, well, I'm a big success. And I think that's what society deems as success. When people have really cool cars and big houses and all the material stuff, they're like, oh, that person's really successful. I should follow what they do. I should listen to what they do. And we know through science, and we know through just anecdotally, I know a lot of people with a lot of money, like a lot, like beyond what most people can imagine. And they're not happy. They're not happy people. Macro, if you look at if you look at them over the course of a week, they're not more happy than they are. They're less happy than they are happy in a given week. And I think that we have to get smarter about that as a society. And we have to think more about what happiness means. And I've stopped actually telling people that I'm chasing happiness, except you mentioned the athlete thing where like you kind of had this loss of identity around not being an athlete anymore.
Yeah.
This happens in business too. So many people, when they sell companies, they lose the identity of being the CEO of DigitalHyve because it's no longer what they do. And that when you're starting a company and when you grow a company, that becomes who you are, and everybody knows you for that thing. So I certainly had that. I had a freak out moment of my own. And what I've worked with, I have an amazing business coach she's based out of Australia, and she really helped me through this of really understanding how to not pair the identity of the business to who you are. These are 2 very different
completely
things.
Side note, is her name Abby?
No, her name's Maxine Minter.
Okay. If never mind then, because if it was someone who I was thinking of, my mind would have just had exploded. But continue. Sorry, that was more for me than the audience.
No worries. No. Maxine is amazing. She's a venture capitalist. She's a lawyer. She went to Harvard. She went to Stanford. She's been in the Bay Area. And she's taught me so much about life in general. So all that to say, I think it's important that we reframe the conversation around success. And, my focus really has been more on fulfillment, because happiness is a moment in time. Happiness is a feeling. And we talked about this earlier. You can't really control your feelings. You can control how you react to things, but you still, like, if somebody's yelling at me, berating me, really mad at me, I could be really angry inside. That's my feeling, but I can choose to just walk away. That's my choice to how to react to it. But I can still feel very angry. I can't control that I feel angry, but I can control my reaction to that feeling. I think that's why I focus less on happiness, because happiness, I've found, is there are moments in time where I am super happy, but life isn't going all that great objectively, but I'm happy. I feel good. There's times where life is going really, really great, and I'm not feeling all that happy. And so what I realize more so now is I can't necessarily control the feeling of happiness, but what I can work towards is being more fulfilled. How to become more fulfilled as a dad, how to become more fulfilled as a husband, how to become more fulfilled as an entrepreneur or CEO. So I'm really chasing fulfillment, and that's because I want to fill the. I'm acutely aware that we're all going to be on this earth for a very short period of time, and it's very unlikely that anyone will remember me or anyone I've ever met more than a generation or 2. Most of us don't know our great grandparents' names, and that isn't
That's
that far
fair.
away from. It's not that far away from you, right? So we get all wrapped up in this idea of like, oh my God, if I do the wrong thing, everybody's gonna judge me, blah blah. But in like 150 years, no one will even know your name, much less what you did on this earth. So I look towards, how do I make the most out of every second that I have? And how do I, that doesn't mean filling every second with being busy. It just means, how do I become the most fulfilled as a human? And then I categorize the things that are, that have value to me. And then I only spend time doing those things.
College can be a roller coaster, but Xant's got your back. First session, absolutely free. After that, just $25. Easy on the pocket, heavy on support. Stress, burnout, addiction, or trauma. Xant's expert coaches are here for you. Download the app, kick stress to the curb, and own your college journey. Your mental health, your way. Xant. Download and thrive today.
I think that's a fair point. And I've never thought of that, because even when I think of famous people or supposedly famous people, I can't even, like, if you told me to name 25 presidents, very famous people in American history, and because
100%.
America has a big presence in the world, I would argue world history, I could probably only name back to like Clinton and then like the first 10, but just because my lifetime. And again, it's a lifetime thing. My grandparents could name X amount more, but when the sad day comes that they are no longer on earth, it doesn't matter how many they can name, really. It matters, okay, the next in line, how many they can name. So to your point, that kind of ties back into just going for it, just trying, but in a realistic or pragmatic way, right? You can't just be like, oh, I have a 3-year-old or a 3-month-old, let me spend all my savings and let me put everything I have into one basket. No, let me try it out. If it works, cool. If it doesn't, I still was blessed enough, like you said, to have enough saved away for a rainy day. Because again, to your point, you have to fulfill your time with the people who will remember you, your family, your kids, your partner, your employees, because if work is a big part of your life, your employees, like, those are the people who are going to remember you for the time that you're on this earth. So that should be where your happiness is coming from, if I'm hearing you correctly. That I've never really thought of it like that, because I think I've been stuck in that trap of just false confidence almost. And not in a way, like, I'm a confident person. I know what I'm capable of and what I'm not, probably to a fault at some points. And I probably think I'm more self-aware than I am, if that makes sense. Like, I'm a very self-aware person, but sometimes I get that attitude of like, oh, I know. And it ends up biting me. But I've, to your point, I've been afraid to do things because of how it might be perceived in the future. If the future is 2 months and then it disappears, okay, 2 months of what I have to deal with, cool. Like, maybe 2 months of people laughing at me or saying he failed, but they're not going to say it forever, because someone else is going to fail in their life. Like, those sticky people, we'll call them, will attach themselves to someone else. So I think that's a beautiful, beautiful way to look at life, is you do matter, figure out where you matter, and really dive deep in there and just get rid of the fluff. And it's such a cliche concept, but very few people so far have been able to truly do that. And I think even people that I look up to, that I think have truly done it, have not done it to their fulfillment yet, right? And again, fulfillment is like success. It's like failure. It's totally different. Not everyone orders a large coffee from Starbucks. Some people just want the medium coffee. So that's what's beautiful to me, is no matter how many times I have conversations with people, I learn something new and try to apply it to my own life. So I'm very excited to take that. Like, this filled my cup today, because like you said, doesn't matter what's happening in the day. Like, I could have been having a terrible day, but just this conversation alone and this presence has restored so much just peace to the rest of my day. And I'm hoping what's the rest of my week, because I have today off for Martin Luther King Day. So I'm appreciative of that, but I just needed this day as a reset day. And I don't think, for me personally, so thank you, Jeff, this conversation could have come at a better time.
I've enjoyed it too. Thank you, Caleb.
Yeah. Before we go, there are 2 things I like to do. This wasn't per se an emotionally taxing conversation, I don't think, for our listeners, as compared to some that we've had. And I could be wrong again. That's a general assumption. So again, if you have had an emotion evoked in you, please 988. I'll say it till my face turns blue. You need and you deserve to get help, right? You deserve to get help. So please call that if it has been emotionally taxing. But from a standpoint of me, I've sat through suicide stories. So it wasn't in that nature taxing. But
Sure.
we always try and end the episode on something happy. I will do that, but I also had a different question I want to ask you. So we'll start with the happy ending, I guess, if you will. What is one thing that you just think of right now? And I'll take out your family because clearly they're very important to you. I'm going to make it a little difficult on you. One thing that you're just like, man, this makes my heart smile.
Well, going back to what we just talked about, there's only a handful of things that I really, really enjoy. One of which is my family. And then and I have a couple hobbies, right? Like I like snowboarding with my friends and, I have some things like that, but I really love business. And what I realized is, my parents, as I mentioned, low income household, uh, they hated their jobs. Their whole life they hated their jobs, but they had to do it to put food on the table. That was the kind of always. So I thought when I was going to get a job, I was like, all right, I'm going to get a job, but I'm going to get a job that's very high paying so that by the time I'm 35, I can retire and I never have to work again. Because I saw work as the enemy. What I realized over time is I actually love the work. I love specific work, right? Work is it means a lot of things to a lot of people. I love very specific things. One thing that I love is taking something that doesn't exist and bringing it into existence. That's what startups are, right? Like I love taking a concept and then actually executing to bring it to life. So whether that's a restaurant or a new company, that's really where I get so much fulfillment. And so I guess that would be the thing that jumps to mind immediately is I just love the idea of like, that doesn't exist, but I have the skills and I have the ambition and I have the desire and the enjoyment to make it all come to life.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and that's a first. So thank you for that. No one's said that before. Number two, if you could just give one person a hug in your life right now that you know needs it, who would it be?
That I know needs it.
Yeah, someone you're just like, man, I might not have talked to you in a while, or whoever. It doesn't have to be a man. I just say man out of habit. I'm sending you a hug. If they ever stumble across it, I'm sending you a hug.
There's this really great guy that I worked with at DigitalHyve, and I still talk to him once in a while. He's actually based out of the Philippines, and we had hooked up with him very, very early on in DigitalHyve history, where we worked with this company, and they had designers that did websites and stuff. I don't know why he came to mind, but he's an awesome dude, and I still just try to send him work and keep him busy because he lives in the Philippines. He's got a crazy life. He's got a bunch of kids. He actually asked me to be the godfather of his kids, and
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
he's such a good guy. I've never met him in person, but I stay in touch with him, and for whatever reason, he popped in my mind because his name's Al, and he's just a great, great dude. So I guess
Well, if he ever comes across this, he's gonna get a nice warm hug. So that'll be
there you
nice.
go.
I
I
love
like it.
that. That's one of my favorite questions that I'm starting to ask. Is just like, again, it just evokes that feeling of just slowing down and being intentional and really thinking about who needs a hug, right? Like everyone needs that little bit of love, if you will, that whether they get it or not, it's just nice to receive. So thank you for being honest in that question and not just being like, well, I would hug my dog or something. But I appreciate that. And where I want to leave listeners with is there anything that if someone stumbles across and is like, man, I really love Jeff, obviously they can find you on social media. They can come to one of your restaurants if they're in the area. But is there anything you want to leave a listener with where you're like, if you love what I'm doing, if you appreciate the advice that I've given, this is how you can support me and my fulfillment?
Oh man, no, I don't need anyone for anything. What I believe is that success comes from putting out more value in the world than you'll ever get back.
Hmm.
So I almost never ask for anything from anyone. I try to do as much as I can for others because that's worked well for me in my life. Because eventually it'll come back to me. But I am not a transactional person. I don't do something and expect you to do something for me. I do something for you and you and you and you, and just expect that the world will somehow work out, that I will win as well. And I just happen to believe that success is not a zero-sum game. It's not like if I win, you lose. I think we all can win. So I'd rather just provide value, and, I know the world will somehow make that work for me too.
Yeah, it's like the golden rule, basically. It's just like you put out there what you hope to get back, but if it doesn't come back, you're content with just putting it out there.
Yeah, that's right.
Man, I
if I
love
help
that.
others, it's great.
I love that. Well, there you go. So I guess Jeff is set. Everyone, you can take that stress off your chest. You don't have to do anything for him. He's working in his own way and putting it out there in the world. And but that being said, if you do for some reason feel like you still want to help, then just go eat some sushi at his new restaurant. It's just go for it. Cause I'm going. I could tell you that right now. Like I said, we talked about this off podcast. I got to get over my oddly crippling fear of sushi. I'm not afraid of the ingredients. I don't like mushrooms because the texture, like I'm a texture guy. The banana has to be perfect. Otherwise it can't go down, but I'm going to try and get over my crippling fear of sushi. And support Jeff in that way. Or actually, he's supporting me in that way. There it is. He's a master at what he does. He's providing me with sushi, not even expecting me to come there. I'm just coming there.
There you go.
He does have a busy day, though, so this will end up round off this episode of the Make Mental podcast. Again, we appreciate each and every person in this community, athlete, non-athlete alike. That's what makes this conversation so beautiful, is that through each person's story, we can all find some sort of value. So Jeff, thank you one last time. And we are looking forward to see what else you can come up with and the joy that you can just continue to give to this world.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.